Today, I want to see if I can weave in some various topics that I feel are coming to the surface. I think in these times where people are really evolving their consciousness, some are having what we could call a spiritual awakening. Others are just feeling the point of reflection, of questioning, who am I? What is this all about? What has meaning for me, to me? What is my purpose? What is this all about, basically? And I think as we're moving from the mind into the body, into the heart, we're beginning to feel our feelings more. So how do we, navigate the realm of emotions? How do we bring our focus and do the inner work in a way that really supports us in this evolution in consciousness? So there's a lot in there, and there's a lot that we have to confront when we're going inwards. And I think part of the challenge of this time is breaking the illusions that we face both internally and externally, the personal and the collective. And I think now more than ever, we're really getting that mirrored reflection. And it's not always easy, right? And actually, one thing that I want to say about this, there was a beautiful thread post that Alex Zek posted on his Instagram account that was kind of saying how thankful he was to these certain global stage characters, politicians, big tech people, that most people, well, not most people, but a lot of people don't like, hate these kind of various groups of men. And it doesn't matter what side, if it's left or right or liberal or conservative or technocratic or all of these things. But he was basically saying, I'm thankful to these men. Why? And then he listed all of these various things that came up of like, what happens when you don't like something? What does it awaken in you? What does it invite you to look for? Like, if you don't like that, like what I'm seeing right now is the trap of people really just getting stuck in the judgment. So I want to look also at what is the gift in the judgment and how to use the judgment for you rather than just being stuck in that kind of frequency and getting lost in the division and the hatred and all of that stuff. So that's a lot to try and cover. So let's see where this goes and let's dive in. This is Corinne Bloom, and you're listening to Raw Conversations. Okay, so first I want to just acknowledge that, these are big times that we're moving through. And if you follow my videos on various social media platforms, wherever you frequent the most, I definitely this last week, I'm recording this on a Friday and it's going to come out on Tuesday, but this past week has been quite an intense one and a real fluctuation of energies from, bliss and expansion. I had 2 days where I took in silence and didn't speak, no phone, no listening to anything, nor watching anything. It was just a lot of me just sitting and being in contemplation and meditating and resting and reading. And the second day I did a little bit of walking. I did listen to some classical music just to drown out the urban noise. And it was such a beautiful experience because it was like my insides felt like I had taken a warm bath, and it was just so nourishing and nurturing. I might have shared this in the last episode. I tell you, time is just, it's very warped for me right now. I can't keep track of what happened on what day. So anyway, just to say that was this beautiful experience and felt so soothing and nourishing. And then I hit a day where it was emotionally very challenging. And this pattern of mine of feeling alone or not even feeling alone. I mean, yes, feeling alone, but also just because of my physical reality right now is that I spend a lot of time on my own if I'm not with my daughter. And it's part of moving to a new place. It's part of winter. It's various things. And so I do feel like these times right now are bringing up a lot of our old patterns. I have some very close friends that also have been reflecting of like, God, this pattern, why won't it just resolve and release? It kind of feels like this Groundhog's Day of revisiting a pattern, and sometimes a pain, whether it's physical, emotional, psychological, spiritual. To be honest, it's all tied in together most of the time anyhow. But I do genuinely feel that this is part of the conscious evolution and growth, is that things come up to move through another layer, right? By now, if you've been listening to me for a while, you know that I don't use terms like getting rid of or fixing. Everything is a process of moving through and letting go. And sometimes the moving through is really important. So part of this quote unquote spiritual awakening is going to be having people moving through a lot of what they normally did not look at and face. And part of that is the illusion of our story, of our narrative, of our belief systems, but also that's being reflected to us in our external world. The illusion of, oh God, I could go into so many various things, but I don't really want to be too focused on the politics of the world. I don't subscribe to it that much because I see it as a grand illusion, a grand play that's on the stage. But I really liked what I was sharing in the intro around just how do we use these plays as a source of motivation, inspiration, growth, evolution, and to not get stuck in the reactivity. But you've heard me say this before, that when we are coming from a place of consciousness, we get to choose how we respond to something. When we're coming from a place of a lack of consciousness, it's unconscious, we're in reaction mode. And so a lot of people are still in reactive mode. And I understand, that there are a lot of things going on in the world and on the political stage that will enrage people. But what often happens is that people get stuck in that. I see it even doing the inner work with people, that one of the hardest things for us as humans is to get out of the trap and the cycle, the repetitive cycle of being in the density of the emotion that is reactive to whatever is happening and the story that we have with that. So it's really easy to get caught, for example, in the kind of judgment game, the blame game, the you're the problem game, whether that's outside of you or inside this part of me. I want to get rid of this part. I want to fix this part. Why is this part still here? Why do I have to deal with this? There's an anger. There's even sometimes an aggression. There's most certainly a judgment. And one thing I just want to say on a side note, rejudgment, because I think it's very nuanced, the word. I think most human beings on this planet have judgment. I still have judgment. I like what Regina Meredith was saying is, she's been doing work on herself for ages, but she was saying that, we all have judgment even in little ways. Like, why did that person do that thing? Like my thing is like living in a neighborhood that's hard to park. I'm like, why did that person park like that? If they had parked like this, then another person would be able to fit behind them. That is a kind of judgment. But I think the progression from judgment and letting go of judgment is not, we can have discernment, we can have opinion, we can have a response to something, but judgment has a very specific quality that tends to be quite aggressive. Right? Whether that's turned in against yourself or towards someone else, it can have this kind of like, why are you doing this? You shouldn't do this. This is bad. Whereas you can have a view, an opinion on something and go, you know what? I don't relate or resonate with this. I don't feel that that's in integrity, that that's morally correct from where I'm standing. And it's looking at it more in I don't know the word that comes up, in a more uplifted way, because instead of staying in the judgment, which is bringing about anger and there's a place for that. That's fine. I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, but this is all about where do we get stuck and how do we move through something. This is what emotional intelligence is it's using and being with and working with the emotions as they come up. So instead of being in that state of aggression or anger and pointing the finger and actually being in a position of disempowerment, of hopelessness, of helplessness, the victim, right? The victim and judgment can go together a lot, right? It's bringing us into a more uplifted state that's like, okay, I don't agree with this, but what am I going to do about it? And so I go back to what Alex Zek was sharing. It's like, okay, if there's all of these things that we don't like, that we may even judge, that we may even hate, again, whether it's within you or outside of you, whether it's personal or collective, what are you going to do about it? How are you going to use that as a point of inspiration and motivation to evolve, right? So it's not about getting rid of, it's about transmuting. So I loved what he said of like, all of them, these men's idea of how the world should be run, of the direction that humans should go in, that it's so extreme in a way that he was like, you know what, I'm thankful that it's brought about an awakening. It's brought about the desire to go more into being a human. As things are like wanting to be merged with technology and basically making us a machine, it's like, no, I want to come more into my humanity. I want to connect more with the earth and nature. I want to be more in community. I want to be more collaborative and compassionate and loving and caring and gentle. There's this movement of sometimes we need the opposite, right? We need that reflection, the polarity to go, you know what? I don't want that. So there's always, it's like always looking for the silver lining, or what is the gift in anything and everything. And that can be quite masterful, because you can look at something that might be so tragic and horrific, and to ask yourself, what is the gift in that, is like a pretty masterful, high spiritual perspective. And I'm not saying that it's superior to another perspective, but I'm saying it takes a lot for us to kind of rise beyond the judgment that the ego can sometimes have, and come into a space of looking at it much more laterally and more expansively and from that soul view. You know, how there is always an opportunity. There's always a lesson. Some of you might not like that word, but there's an opportunity. There's a lesson that is not about praise and punishment, but the lesson is, how am I learning and growing through this? And I get to choose that. My soul gets to choose that, right? No, I'm not going to be graded for it. And what can I, like, we are the alchemists. So what can I make out of this? And I think this part of the spiritual awakening, which I would say is just the remembrance of who we are. And part of that is going to be remembering our abilities, our dormant abilities, remembering that we are the greatest technology. This human design is quite phenomenal when you actually really trust the wisdom of your body and your psyche, and you learn the language of your emotions. And, you know, we have all of these abilities that have just been really dormant because there's been so much, such a fog placed over us. And as the fog lifts, it's funny, actually, it was just really foggy this morning. I haven't been in the fog in so long. And it's just such a beautiful experience when it lifts and the sun finally comes through. It's such a beautiful metaphor for, there are moments where we cannot see anything. And you know the light is behind, but you can't see anything. You can't see the building in front of you. You can't see the horizon. You can't, nothing. And then all of a sudden it starts to slowly thin and dissipate. And then all of a sudden everything comes back into view again. And I think this is what the spiritual awakening is all about right now. It's really this, we're seeing through what we have not been able to see through. And so the illusion, because sometimes it's almost like when you can't see something, imagine that you were kind of blinded to something for so long. It was just like a scrim. You're going to project pictures on it. And it makes me think of Plato's allegory of the cave, you know, of the controllers that are projecting these images of reality onto the cave wall, keeping people in this cycle and loop of enslavement. And the ones that could kind of see the illusion for what it was and taking off their shackles, which you can take off yourself, there's no key to them, and walking out of the cave and up into the surface of earth and being like, oh my God, there's this whole other reality and existence. And that's beautiful and enlightening. And that's the part that I say about the spiritual awakening process that does feel like an enlightenment. Light has been shed in, it is brought in, that the fog has cleared, and that you can see the blue sky and the sun, and everything is brought into the beauty and the light of day. And the traumatic part of it is like, oh shit, like what have I been in for all this time that I believed to be true and believed to be my reality? And how did I get duped into believing that? I thought I was smarter than that. There's a lot that we have to confront, confronting our own fears, confronting our own shadow, confronting the shadow of the world, confronting of the shadow of how the world has been run. Up until this point, because I believe that we're changing it, but we're not going to change it by being in judgment and just blaming and being in the anger of it. We're going to change it by going, okay, take the passion and the energy of your anger and direct it in a way where you get to be a part of the solution. Direct it into being that which you do not like. And that to me has been the most painful irony of, parts of the past 5 years as people have been really thwarted against one another and into division and into sides and into differing opinions and all of that, is that you see the hypocrisy, you see the painful irony of people becoming the very thing that they hate, which is judgment, judgment and showing hatred and showing a lack of compassion and kindness and righteousness. And so the very people that they're pointing their finger to going, this person is a monster, this person is evil, or this, they're maybe not in such an extreme form, but they're becoming that themselves. So we have to be so mindful of being humble in this process. And, we all go there at points. We all have judgment. We all, have opinions, and we all also are being tested to expand our minds and move beyond our maybe belief systems that actually have been very limited and have limited us. So one of the things that I want to say about judgment, how do we release judgment, is you begin by letting go of judgment of yourself, your experience, your feelings, your thoughts. I think it's very hard to jump towards, I'm not going to judge anything or anyone, if we don't know how to do that with our own humanity. So I feel for myself, I can say that I have become so much better at not being judgmental towards my emotions, my feelings. So I'm going to give you an example, actually, because the other day when I got kind of plummeted into this just pain, just emotional pain of feeling this kind of loneliness sweep over me. And I had all of these emotions. I had a good cry. So this is what's interesting. I didn't judge myself for that. I wasn't like, oh, Corinne, you shouldn't be crying, and you shouldn't be feeling like this, and you shouldn't have this, that, da, 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 da. I just haven't had that experience for a long time. I don't go, oh, you're having a bad down day, you shouldn't be feeling like that. I remember back in my 20s, I did do that. It's like, oh, I'm having a sad day, or I feel down, or I feel depressed, or I feel this, that, and the other. And there was the judgment of like, well, that's a waste of a day. You shouldn't be feeling like that. I no longer have that anymore. So that layer of judgment I've worked through. Now, was there a voice in me that was very hard on myself? In it more like a voice of, I guess you could say it's judgment, but it was more a voice of, oh God, how do I describe it? There was this feeling, which I very, very rarely go to. And this also got kind of triggered the Saturday before, and maybe I brought that into my last episode. But kind of this feeling of, God, my life is pathetic, or why did I choose this life? It's like a little bit the pity party. But it was almost like a different flavor than judgment of how I'm feeling. It was a kind of judgment, but it's so hard to articulate. It's really interesting. I'm trying my best, y'all. There's still layers of going deeper into our story and into our identity. But when you can stop to at least judge the experience that you're having in that moment, it means that we're moving through these layers, right? And I think that's why I say that these words are very nuanced. So in one layer, we could have really, quote unquote, mastered that layer. And then I find that like I said, I don't frequent that place of going into pity or patheticness or any of those things, because I honestly, for the most part, don't judge myself. But it's like when something that's really deep down that is getting triggered or is coming up as a pattern to the surface, then judgment is one of the first things to come in, right? So, and as it comes in, it's staying with it and not letting it spiral too much into the story. I find that I need to allow the story to come out. And I'm so grateful that I have these amazing soul sisters where we, share a lot with each other through voice messages. And sometimes it's like just airing it out. Like even recording it, it's almost like it doesn't matter if somebody else listens to it. There is a power to being witnessed and it being held and then being cared for, which I really received on that day. It was just, I'm so grateful to my soul sisters, just beyond measure. But sometimes it's like, one of the things, a tool that you could use if you don't have that kind of community that you can share with in that way is literally record yourself on your phone. You don't have to send it to anyone. You don't even have to re-listen to it. But sometimes just putting it into voice and expressing it, because we're also learning to have to open our fifth chakra, to open our throat and to express it. And whether you express it to someone else or not doesn't matter, but it's allowing the feeling and the emotions to have a voice. Like when I'm working with people's emotions, it's going into the various emotions and asking, okay, if that feeling had a voice, what would it want to say right now? Because every emotion has something to say because it's a messenger. And this is how we cultivate the emotional intelligence, because we're learning the language of our emotions. We're learning the language of our being. And we're learning how to have a conversation with these parts, various parts of us, and our higher self, and our human self, and our ego self, and all of these various parts. And I know that can sound really like compartmentalized or fragmented, but sometimes when we can see the various parts, we're not stuck in the, it helps us to see the forest for the trees, right? And it's still a forest. There is a wholeness with all of that. But sometimes when you're right up against the tree and the bark, you can't see anything else beyond that point. So what I'm trying to say here around judgment is it's nuanced and there's various layers. But if you get stuck in judging yourself for having whatever experience you're having, it's not that it's pointless, because nothing is, you could say, pointless, but we're missing the opportunity to take what we're experiencing and to allow it to be a catalyst for growth or healing or letting go or releasing. And so for me that day, I felt the emotion. I went through the story. I shared this story. I felt the feelings of the pity or the patheticness, which I don't frequent often, but I felt it. But here's the thing, I allowed it. Just allow it. Allow it, and it eventually will shift. Because the moment that we say, don't, you shouldn't, and that judgment just stays in the judgment, nothing can be changed. It becomes rigid, it becomes hard, it becomes brittle. And then it's almost like we take this imprint of it and we bury it into ourselves, and then that's just another layer to the wound, or another layer to the story or the identification of whatever your belief might be. I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy, I'm not significant, I'm not lovable, I'm not smart, I'm not, whatever your belief might be. It's like it hardens that identity. It gives it more of a like a structure, rather than when we allow ourselves to just feel and have the experience and breathe through it, sit with it, feel it, breathe through it, allow it, let it go. Then we keep this kind of more, I almost want to say like porous, movable form that isn't concrete, right? A lot of our identity becomes very concrete. I am this person. I am this belief. I am what I do. Instead of when we go, okay, I am innately worthy, good enough, whatever, you get to know the resonance and the essence of who you are, then you might move through the beliefs, or you might move through the feelings or the experiences or the triggers or whatever, but there is not the identification of that, right? I'm feeling this, but it's not that I am that. I'm feeling sad. I'm feeling alone. I'm feeling pathetic. I'm feeling rejected. I'm feeling abandoned. I'm feeling whatever, ... But I am not that, right? And this is a really important distinction. And then from that place, it's like the surrender occurs, the softening occurs, because we're not forming harder edges and pasting. It's like putting another layer of paint on top of another layer of paint on top of another layer of paint. You know, that's what happens when we're not moving through something, but we're just in the judgment of it. So I've really gone off on one around judgment, but like I said, it's nuanced. And I do believe that we are coming into a time where it's like, can we just let go of it? The judgment might come up, but don't get identified with it. Or use it as a catalyst for, okay, if you don't like what you're seeing, whether it's inside or outside of you, okay, what do you want to move towards that would be the evolution or the transmutation or the alchemization? We are alchemists. The alchemization of that thing. So if you see evil and darkness, if you see people being mean and you know, judgmental, and you're judging them for being judgmental, again, another irony, what do you want to move towards? How will you alchemize that into being the change? And it's a very humbling process, because when we're dealing with judgment, we have to become humble within that judgment. And so sometimes what I will say with all sorts of things that come up, but judgment is a good one, and as we're talking about it, let's go with that one, is the observation, the witness that comes in that goes, oh, I'm judging myself right now. Oh, I'm judging that person right now. You know, even if it's like, I'm judging the way that person parked. You know, I'm judging the fact that I believe they don't have the awareness and the, you know, whatever, the respect of other people to park in a better way. So that, yeah, I'm just using this as a silly example. You're like, yeah, Corinne, we've heard this story before. But I'm using it as a good example, right? And a lot of, I think I even did an episode a long time ago about sometimes people just don't have the capacity to show up in the ways that we'd like for them to show up. And that comes up a lot in relationship. And, you know, so capacity is a big one. And capacity takes time, because capacity takes the focus and the will and the want to go in and do the inner work. That's what expands our capacity. Our capacity is really how well can I sit with and be with without abandoning, neglecting, whatever, my experience, somebody else's experience, the experience at large on a collective level, right? How is my capacity to be able to sit, be with, and hold this? And then how is my capacity through that sitting and being with and holding to alchemize it into something that is a more pure form of that, right? So we're getting out of the density of it. So let's take a moment to just feel into all of that, because I know that I've been tapping upon various things here. I think that it's a very confronting mirror right now And I think a lot of people are tired of fighting, whether you're fighting your own, I don't like this term, but I'll use it because it's a popular one, whether you're fighting your own inner demons or you're fighting the quote unquote demons that you see out in the world, right? I think the point is to let go of the fight and to come more into that empowered, uplifted state of what am I standing for? And how am I going to be the one that carves a path in the direction of the evolution of that thing rather than getting stuck in an old cycle? We are learning to break cycles right now. We're breaking free from the shackles of patterns, right? Both within and without. But I'm not going to lie and say that sometimes it's really hard. Sometimes it's really sad, painful. Sometimes it really fucking hurts. Sometimes it's really, really lonely. Sometimes it's despairing and hopeless, and you know, so much can come up of just like, what the fuck is this all about? And there's an opportunity also in that of like, okay, be with that. Sit with that. Can you meet yourself with love in that place? Can you meet yourself with love even in the existential questions of who am I? What am I doing here? What is this all about? And I think when we meet ourselves at that point, it's a still point. It's a 0 point. It's at the edge of the void where anything and everything is possible. But let us not get stuck in, like, if we don't even, if we get stuck in the story and the reaction, we never reach that still point, that 0 point, the edge of the void where anything and everything is possible. And so that we never get to the place of like, okay, what do we want to create here? What do I want to create in myself? How do I want to evolve? And if I do it on the inside, the external will absolutely reflect that. You know, people get so angry at politicians. And I was listening to someone saying that, you know, politics is just a reflect. Okay, yes, they manipulate the people and the way that the people think. But if you come, this is why I speak so much about sovereignty and authenticity and get to know yourself, know thyself, get to know your everything, your language of emotions, your energy, your resonance, all of this. What is authentic? What is true? Get to know your intuition, all of these things. So you can decipher what's true and what's not true. You can have discernment of what's authentic and what's not authentic. And then you can think critically for yourself and not be brainwashed and not be manipulated and not be all of these things, so that then you recognize that the very beings that you don't like, that you're judging, they have no power over you, and you're not going to feed and focus on what they're putting out there, because otherwise, if you look at it from an energetic perspective, they're harvesting all of your anger and judgment and creating the reality that they want based on us focusing on what they want us to focus on. So the discernment of I'm not going to give my you've heard me say this, the greatest currency right now, what is so valuable is your focus and attention. Again, this is part of the spiritual awakening, is self-responsibility, accountability. You are a powerful being. How are you going to choose to play? Where are you going to choose to place your focus and attention and your energy? And are you going to focus it with love, or are you going to focus it with fear and judgment and anger and hatred? Or are you going to look at those parts within you and love them and transmute them and alchemize them into the very thing that you want to see in the world, right? I know I'm repeating a little bit, but sometimes our brain, when we're breaking down patterns, we need to have repetition in order to kind of get on a different track. It's not an easy time. We're doing inner work that might happen over lifetimes, and we're doing it maybe in a matter of years. And I highly recommend just finding support systems, you know, whether that's through people you know, or communities online, or podcasts, or a mentor, or a coach, or a therapist, or something, but something that really supports you as we ask profound questions and as we move through challenging times of breaking down illusions and old systems and all of these things. And one thing that I said in a video yesterday, because I had a very, very different day after that hard day. And again, I find that I move through things very quickly just simply because I allow myself to sit in the fucking fire. So this is what I was talking about yesterday. It's like when you sit in the fire, it burns away everything that has come up, right? Not because you're getting rid of it, but because you're moving through it. So you have to sit in the fire, and sometimes it's going to be incredibly uncomfortable. But I always find the other side of contraction is expansion. It's the inhalation, exhalation, inhalation, exhalation, contraction, expansion. You know, we're kind of always in that state. So know that if you're in a state of contraction, you will move into a state of expansion. And you will get to that place faster if you don't get stuck in the contraction. And with that said, when you're in this expansion, and you might be in a long period of expand, and then there's going to be another contraction. And that's okay. That's part of the cycle. Because then that contraction will take you into an evolved form of another expansion. You know, I see it as this spiraling that keeps on like moving through the cosmos, you know? So what's the invitation today? Do you have the courage to look into and through the illusions that are within and without and around you? How do you relate to judgment and work with judgment? Are you getting stuck in it, or are you using it as a catalyst? And then what have you learned so far about emotions and feelings? How can you take the things within yourself that maybe you don't like, and how do you take them as a source of inspiration and motivation to evolve and grow into the being and the version of yourself that you want to be? Not out of judgment that you're not good enough as you are now, but because you want to liberate yourself and you want to be in the fullest expression of yourself. And once you do that within yourself, put that as that's the inner, right? That's the inside. Now do that on the outside. Take someone, something that you don't like, that you're judging, and see what is the gift in this? How is this a catalyst for actually being in that line of progression and evolution? It's like I can see the image so clear in my mind. Sometimes I wish I could just take it out and put it onto like a page as a diagram. I know people do that with drawing, but it's like when it's really complex. But ultimately, it's always a feeling. It's a feeling, and that's going to be a big part of this invitation is really get to know the resonance, energy, frequency, feeling, embodiment, whatever you want to call it, of these states of being. And can you softening the edges of judgment is getting out of good, bad, right, wrong. Right? As long as we still, like, yes, there is the duality, you could say, of good and evil. But if we get stuck in that kind of paradigm, then we're always going to be in this ping pong match, whether it's within ourselves or within the collective or whatever's on the world stage, rather than actually integrating the good and evil, integrating the shadow and the light. And that's what propels us into a greater evolution. Where was I just reading about how... I don't normally get into this kind of terminology, but that, there is no Lucifer as a singular entity, that actually it's an energy that is within you. And often that energy, I had this conversation with a girlfriend of mine the other day, that often what we call the devil is actually just an expression of our fear that has been unseen. And all our fear that is unseen requires is love. Remember that fear is the absence of love. And so if you want to transmute fear you give it love. You want to transmute judgment, you give it love. You want to transmute hatred, you give it love. Love is the answer, my friends. Surprise, surprise. Anyway, I'm going to leave it at that because it's getting long, and that's been a bit of a kitchen sink of a lot of hodgepodge of things, and I don't know if it's made any sense. But as always, take what resonates, leave what doesn't. May it open up a source of just contemplation, coming up with your own answers. I'm not here to say that I have the answer or the only answer. I'm here to just create the conversation so that we can reflect and have our own inner conversation. So, yeah, take with it and do with it as you choose, right? This is what these times are about. There is no guru, there is no teacher, there is no manual, there is no one answer. You have the power to choose how are you going to take something and what are you going to make from it. So maybe if there's been aspects of this talk where you're like, I don't agree with you, Corinne. I don't like what you said here. I think you're wrong here. Okay, that's great. That's fine. You're totally entitled to have your own opinion. That's absolutely okay. But rather than going, I'm going to attack her and I'm going to say this and that and the other. No, take it. Take what you disagree. If you disagree with me on something, take that and let it be a point of curiosity within you. Okay, why do I disagree about this? What does it trigger in me? What are the innovative thoughts, ideas, feelings that can come out as a solution to that? How is this motivating me? Do you see what I'm saying? Like, even use this talk. If there's shit in it that you're like, I don't like what you said, Corinne, great. How can you use that as a motivation and a redirect of where you want to place your focus? And if you find that it's triggering something and you're getting stuck in judgment and blame and anger and I don't like this and I don't like Corinne because of this, blah, 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 I would really lovingly invite you to then go, why am I in such a place of judgment? Why am I in such a state of aggression? Just for example, and it might be with me, it might be somebody else that you are listening to or that you read or that you have a conversation with or you overhear a conversation or you see something on, I don't watch television, but whatever, that, use it for your greater good. Use it as a catalyst. All of it is to be used. It's all energy. And what we're learning about ourselves is that we are remarkable alchemists. You can take anything and everything and alchemize it into what you would like to create in the world. And I hope this is an invitation for us all, that we can take all of the pain, suffering, tragedy, horror, injustice, fucked upness of the world and take that energy and make it into something that is beautiful and made with love. So that is my wish for each and every one of us. So there you go. I'm going to leave it at that and loving you from afar. You've been listening to Raw Conversations with Corinne Bloom. Thanks so much for showing up, listening in, and being a part of the conversation with me.